Everyone thinks that we're very rich. He said we've got to keep up this facade of being glamorous, and sometimes we can't afford this facade. And it's a bit like that with cricketers as well. They've got to be seen to be cricketers, right? And so it helped me enormously. My first 3-4 years were entirely because of the arrogance of Indian cricket. And so I keep hoping that Indian cricket stays arrogant because it allows me to do well. But it's come in the way. A lot of our young Indian cricketers cannot think beyond cricket. And if they thought beyond cricket, they would get into the beautiful world. Expecting them to get into the world of a Narayan Murthy or an Azim Premji would be beyond them, to be honest. But they need to allow themselves to get into the world of Pete Sampras, of Lance Armstrong, of Tiger Woods, of Michael Jordan. But to them, cricket is the only thing that matters, and I think that prevents people from growing. And that's why CLR James said, what do they know of cricket who only cricket know? And maybe a lot of you PGB2s, what do you know of management who only management know? A couple of other things that helped me. I don't know if that's relevant on the paths to excellence. But a couple of things that helped me, and I mentioned that on that program that you talked about, which Karan Thapar did, called Face to Face with Young Achievers. You know the word I loved most in that? Not face, not achievers, but young. Yeah? You crave what you lose, always. So I crave the words young and hair. But I told him that one of the things that worked for me was I was willing to be a non-striker. I was quite happy to be a non-striker. I played in a university team where I was nowhere near being the best player. But I wanted to be very good at something, and I knew I could not be very good. I could not be the best in batting. I knew I could not be the best in bowling. I did enough of both to be in the side. But I loved fielding from the bottom of my heart. You know, I'd get up in the morning, and the sound I would imagine was not the ball coming off the middle of the bat. It makes a beautiful sound. It makes chick. Have you heard that sound? Not talk. When it goes talk, it means either you've got a bad bat or you can't bat. When it goes chick, it's a beautiful sound. But the sound I loved more than anything else was the ball hitting my palm. You know, when the ball hits the palm, it's exactly where it should when you're taking a difficult catch. And I'd imagine that sound. And I found that because I was the best fielder in the team, I became friends with everybody. Because when a bowler bowls a bad ball, when he bowls short outside the off stump, he closes his eyes and in his mind, he sees 4 runs going against his name in the scorebook. And if you can dive to your left and cut it off and keep it down to 1, you get the biggest grin on his face. Because you've saved him 3 runs. It doesn't count in yours. You don't go in the scorebook for that. He goes in the scorebook as 3 runs short. Or if you take a great catch, you take a brilliant catch, in the bowling analysis, it goes in the bowler's name. So by being very, very good at fielding, I was actually becoming the best friend of the bowler, and I was making myself invaluable to the team. And I found that when I batted, if I could get off the strike as quickly and as consistently as possible, I was actually doing a very good job for my team. Because I was building a partnership. And partnerships are the lifeblood of every innings. And I grew in course of time to bat at number 6. But when I started off, I'm batting 8 or 9. And at 8 or 9, and you're batting with number 5, everyone's sitting in the pavilion, they want number 5 to bat. And the moment number 8 takes a single and gets off the strike, they say, good, because now number 5 can bat. And I was part of a lot of partnerships, a lot of big partnerships where I didn't score much. But it added to my value to the side. And I was quite happy being non-striker. And then when I got into the commentary box, initially I tried to compete. It was the biggest mistake I made. I tried to compete because around me, everybody was asking me, how much cricket have you played? Everybody. It was like there were ghosts around every corner. I've written another 700 pages of Harry Potter on that. How much cricket have you played? And I said, I'll show them I understand cricket. And in the course of time, I said, no, I don't need to. And I discovered that if I could play non-striker in the commentary box, where I say my job is in making Sunil Gavaskar look better. Can I make Jeff Boycott look better? Can I make Ravi Shastri look better? Then they will want to work with me, not with someone who's competing with them. And in trying to make them look better, I actually look better myself. And I found that the moment I started playing non-strike, I dropped my ego. Incidentally, let me tell you, in the world of excellence, if you have ego and anger on your side, you don't need an opponent. Because you've done 90% of the job towards ruining yourself anyway. And I said, I don't have an ego. Yeah? What the hell? I've got the greatest job in the world. So I'll make them look good. And I found in making them look good, there was this sort of mid-50s lady I met in the Taj Bengal one day, lovely silvery hair. And she came and said, you know, Mr. Bogle, you always ask the questions that we want to ask. And I said, I think I'm doing the right thing. Because in the rarefied world of 20 centuries and 25 centuries, the common man gets left out. Sometimes the common man that allows cricket to work. So as an anchor, I said, can I, on my programs, make my guest feel as comfortable as possible? Because if my guest is comfortable, my guest will be relaxed. If my guest is relaxed, my guest will perform very well on the program. If my guest performs very well on the program, then my program looks good. If my guest is insecure because he's scared that I'm going to scream at him, then I'm not going to produce a good program. So sometimes by subjugating the self, and that's what a lot of cricket coaches and swimming coaches are saying, subjugate the self to achieve excellence. I don't know if that will work for someone who's head of sales or someone who's a medical rep, because that, I think, is one of the most difficult jobs in the world. I mean, we all make fun of medical reps, right? It's the most difficult job in the world. But I thought by subjugating the self, it actually worked for me. I didn't start off saying, I will subjugate the self, because that looks like it comes out of PGB2 class. But it worked for me, and maybe it will work for you someday. A lot of us place a lot of emphasis on talent, don't we? I mean, we look at someone who's talented and say, wow, right? Talent does that to people. It dazzles, you know. Talent dazzles, and you look at talent and say, wow, I wish I could be like that. And yet you find that excellence is not about talent alone. In fact, a major part of excellence has nothing to do with talent. And in course of time, once you go beyond a certain level, ability or talent is the most useless virtue to possess. It's what you do with that talent that matters. And that's why he used a word, Mukesh used a word that I love, attitude. Beyond a point, it is attitude that counts for far more than talent. Because talent breeds an ego. And talent never solves problems beyond a point. And I was fascinated by something that Sandy Gordon said when we were doing a program together. Because I had seen a lot of young cricketers, extremely talented, who the moment they faced a roadblock did not know what to do. Because they had never had to struggle to succeed. They always used their talent to succeed. And Vinod Kambli is an example of that. The moment Courtney Walsh bounced him in Bombay, he was 22 years old. Was he? Yeah, he was 22 years old then. In 1994, he was 22 years old. Didn't know what to do. Did not play a test match after that. His last test match was when he was 22 years old. Just did not know how to play the bouncing ball because talent had solved everything for him before. In the Australian Army, when they are, and this is something that doesn't come from sport, but it's something a sports scientist told me, that when they're building an elite core team, they look at your career record, your track record, and if you've never failed, they don't pick you. They don't pick you because they say, if this man experiences failure, will he know what to do? They pick people who failed and bounced back. And that is where your attitude comes through. And, I mean, let's look at excellence. What is excellence about? It's about being in the top 10% in your profession. I mean, I know I'm talking to people who want to be in the top 1%, but there are a lot of ordinary people around us around. So let's say top 10%. Is talent important when you get to be in the top 10%? I mean, everybody in the top 10% will have the same talent, right? So what's your USP? It's what you do with the talent that counts. And unfortunately in our sport, and I think in India as a nation, we're dazzled by talent a great deal. I found that beyond a certain time in sport, as indeed in broadcasting, that your work ethic and your attitude counts from far more than talent. I mean, Tendulkar is a prime example. The moment you say Tendulkar, if I asked you to, if you had one of those things that talk show hosts do, I'll give you a word and you give me a connecting word in one word. You say Tendulkar, you'll say talent, right? He played 55 games as a 14-year-old without a break. 55 days. He'd practice for 2 hours, play a game, practice 2 hours, fall asleep on the dining table. And do that 55 days in a row. That's attitude. You know, we think And this is something we talk about in our corporate lectures as well, where we advise against talent. When Tendulkar was born, it wasn't that this nurse picked him up and said, here, Mrs. Tendulkar, here's 70 hundreds for you. Yeah? It isn't Tendulkar's talent that's produced 70 hundreds. It's his work ethic, it's his attitude, and more than anything else, when he reaches the top, it's his passion to perform. And that counts for far more. The attitude and the passion counts for far, 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 far more than ability. Ability opens the first door. It might open the second door. It's not going to open the last door for you. Because the guy who's bowling the ball at you has got equal ability as you. He's not going to run up to bowl and say, oh, sorry, you're a genius. Sorry, I'll give you a simple ball. Which is what India's bowlers did in 1948 when they went to Australia. They were so much in awe that they said, we are going to bowl to Bradman. It was understandable. In those days, India was a different country. But they were in awe of bowling to Bradman. How were they ever going to get him out? And they didn't. And Bradman enjoyed himself. If you look at Bradman's record, actually, Bradman only ever played in 2 countries. And when Bradman playing at home in home conditions against a half-strength Indian team, see, he must have had a party for them every evening. It's also excellence, I think it's also about learning from mistakes. You know, there'll be a lot of people in this room, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people in your learning academy as well, who are so driven that they think a mistake is a crime and that a mistake is a matter of shame. Let's be honest to ourselves, guys and girls, sorry. You know, we guys are very limited in our view of the world. We're a bit like George Bush, but I can't say that openly. We keep saying guys all the time, and if you worked in sport all your life, then you sort of tend to go into the guy thing a little too much, which is sad for everybody. Deep down inside, you ask yourself, when you make a mistake, what's your first reaction? I hope nobody ever looks at me again. Right? I'm going to tell you that mistakes can be your best friend. Because the more mistakes you make, the more you know what not to do. And excellence is as much about knowing what to do as knowing what not to do. And if you can be outstanding at knowing what not to do, then the road to what to do opens up before you, doesn't it? I tried telling that to one of my friends who was in the same dorm as me, and we stayed in touch afterwards. He was one of these IT freaks. And I was telling this, I said, this is my attitude about mistakes. I said, the more mistakes you make, the more you know what not to do. And he promptly extended the limits to infinity, as you tend to do, and said, therefore, the most successful guy is the one who only makes mistakes. Right? That would be a mathematical conclusion to it, wouldn't it? Every time I make a mistake, I learn. The more mistakes I make, the more I learn. If I only make mistakes, I only learn. Right? It doesn't quite work like that. But I've yet to meet a situation in life where you're not allowed to make a mistake. Everybody's allowed to make a mistake. It's the second or the third mistake that you're not allowed to make. You make the same mistake twice, thrice, then you lose respect. It's, you know, when bowlers are planning how to get batsmen out, they look for weaklings and say, you know, this guy gets out here all the time. It's because you get out there all the time that they're able to make a plan against you. But if you make a mistake and say, I will not make that mistake again, because I know this is where I can go wrong, then you're starting to do very well. And I found it helped me enormously. I made a million mistakes. Honestly, I've made the most embarrassing mistakes on television. On live television, I've made some absolute bloomers. But I said I won't make them again. Because every time I got to that situation, I said, hang on, buddy, last time you were there, you did that wrong. So it's almost as if little alarm bells go off in your mind. Every time you sit in front of a live camera and you're heading down a path, very often that path is, with 40 seconds to go before ending a program, asking Sidhu a question. You know you've made a mistake straight away. Because it won't end in 40 seconds. But